Hey friends, my name is Jacob, and in today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I use wet into wet technique to create a really rich and dramatic ocean sunset scene. You can find the full-length version of this demo on my Patreon, which is only $3 a month, and you'll get full-length demos and full-quality reference photos that you can download and try to paint these scenes for yourself. So this is the reference photo I'm going to be working from today. It's a scene from the Oregon coast, an amazing coastal sunset, and I really want to capture that kind of warmth that's spreading throughout the entire scene, and especially that reflection from the sun that's kind of shooting straight down into the water, creating that glow. So I'm just going to drop in a really quick, simple sketch, deciding where my horizon line is going to be. I'm going to put the sun kind of slightly off center, and then I'm just going to really quickly outline the primary shapes of these waves. Where the foam is falling over, where the top of the wave is, where the bottom is. Making sure the lines are dark enough for me to be able to see the line work once I put the first wash of paint on top. Now I'm going to go over the line work with a kneaded eraser just to get rid of some of that excess graphite and prevent smudging. Then I'm going to get the paper wet on both sides, gently scrubbing it down with this sponge so I don't damage the paper. And wetting the paper on both sides will help it lay flat, and it will give me more time to work wet into wet, which is going to be the key to making this scene work. So the first thing I need to do is paint in all of the lightest values of the scene. So I'm dropping in that glow that spreads out from the sun, using a bunch of different warm colors, yellows, reds, oranges. And I want to capture that kind of halo, that glow around the sun. So I'm painting around that area with a slightly darker mix of paint, that peach color. Now I'm going to drop in some really warm reds right underneath the sun for that glow that's being cast over the surface of the water. And you see that as I'm painting into this area, which is wet, with more paint, I get these really soft shapes, really soft edges. And the wetter the paper is when you paint into it, the softer and fuzzier the shape is going to be. So just painting some of those darker clouds in the top portion of the sky. And I want that halo around the sun to be a little smoother. I want the gradient between those two colors to be a little smoother. So I took a clean, damp brush and I kind of scrubbed into that area. And then I just mixed up some additional warm color and I painted into that halo, just trying to smooth out that transition a little more. Now I'm going to start getting some of those warm colors into the ocean. those colors that are being reflected into the water. Getting some dry brush work going on in the foreground for that kind of sparkle. Dry brush is where you have mostly dry paper or completely dry paper, and then you kind of let the brush skip across the surface of the paper and you get this broken effect. It helps if your paper has a bit of texture when you do this. Now I want to start establishing the initial color for these waves. I really want that ocean green to come through, even though the waves are quite dark. So I'm mixing up a greenish blue color. A quite thick mixture of paint, so that when I add additional layers on top of this, that color will still show through. And I do need to wait to paint in the distant ocean up to the horizon because the paper is still a little bit too damp, and I need the horizon line to be razor sharp. So in order to get that effect, I need the paper to be dry. But for the water, I need to paint wet into wet so I get beautiful soft edges. That's the key to painting realistic water and clouds as well, is painting wet into wet. But you gotta be a little careful. When you're adding more paint into an area that's already wet, you need to make sure that there isn't too much water in the paint mixture. If there is, you're gonna get a lot of blooms and cauliflower edges, which can kind of be an unpleasant, unwanted effect. So now I'm going to start adding some darks, the initial wash of dark color to this wave. And here I'm going to be able to show that foam that's falling down the face of the wave by painting around that area with a darker color. It's essentially just a darker mix of the same colors I used to paint the wave initially. I don't want to just go with a blackish color because that would take away from the vibrancy of this wave. And you see that as I'm painting into the water area, I'm still getting those really nice soft edges. They're a little sharper than the soft edges that I got in the sky because the paper is slightly more dry and the paint that I'm using is a lot thicker, or the mixture, I should say, is thicker. So my edges are soft, but they're a little bit more controlled, and that lets me paint these details of the ripples that are happening in the waves without them looking too razor sharp. And from here on out, it's really just a matter of refining and defining the texture of the surface of the water and establishing the shapes of these. I guess there's 3 primary waves happening. So by painting a dark line at the base of this wave, I'm separating it from the rest of the water. Because as that wave curls over, it's casting a very small shadow at the lip. And by putting that shadow down, it's implying that there is an object that has volume to it. And I'll go back and darken that line up a little bit later. And I'm doing all of this while the paint is still damp. See how we're starting to get some more separation between those three main waves in the foreground as I add the darks in. Now the paper is dry enough in this area that I can start to drop in the distant ocean up to the horizon line. And that warm color that I put down in the first wash is going to show through from underneath the paint that I put on top. Watercolor is transparent, so different layers are able to show through each other. And I'm able to leave out these little highlights here and there, representing the crests of those distant waves that are catching that sun. Trying to make that horizon line as straight as I can, and right as it gets to the sun, I'm slowly tapering off the paint. I want the effect to be that the horizon line slightly disappears right under that glow of the sun, and then I can take a paper towel and very carefully lift up some of that paint to further emphasize that effect. Kind of like the light is spilling over the horizon. Now I'm just going to establish some subtle texture in the distant waves using the exact same technique that I did in the foreground. The only difference is my brush strokes are much smaller. The lines are a lot thinner, which helps with the perspective, making these look like more distant waves. And then the lines get smaller and smaller and closer together as they approach the horizon line. One of the difficulties in painting from reference photos is that the colors get kind of smashed because of how JPEGs compress things. So it's really hard to see the richness of color that's actually happening in these waves. But if you were to stand here in person, you would see an entire array of beautiful dark blues and greenish blues and the warm colors from the sun. So I really wanted to portray the feeling you would get of standing here in person by making the colors really rich and vibrant. And now I'm re-emphasizing some of these dark areas in the waves with a really dark mixture of blue-gray. And I use that Payne's Gray on my palette to help darken things up a little more. And I'm just emphasizing and restating the texture in the foamy areas and at the base of these waves. Really pushing the contrast so that this area pops out more. If you enjoy my videos and you've been watching for a while and you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe. It really, really helps me out. And it allows me to make more videos like this for you. So at this point in the painting, it's just really small refinements and emphasizing certain areas. I have a very dark mixture of blue on my brush, which is quite thick. And I can take this slightly larger brush and splay out the tip so it has teeth, and I can use those teeth to get some really quick texture for those really tiny ripples on the surface of the water. And also, by darkening the area of the water around that glow from the sun, I'm able to make that glow more vibrant and brighter. And the fact that the paper is damp still gives me more time to kind of play around with different aspects of adding texture. I can even lift up paint if I need to. If the paper was completely dry, I would be stuck with how it is. I wouldn't be able to change anything. So, although watercolor can be intimidating because of the fact that you can't modify things as you go in the way you can with acrylic or oil, there is a little bit of wiggle room that you have as long as the paper is still damp. So I'm just going to drop a few birds in the sky, and I'm going to call this finished. So once again, you can find the full-length version of this tutorial step by step, uncut, on my Patreon. Only $3 a month, and you will really help me keep this channel going. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you on the next one.